Thailand is a founding member of ASEAN, and in 2015, ASEAN entered itself into a full-fledged ASEAN economic communities. Every country in ASEAN and beyond are preparing for 2015. I would like to ask Khun Sirisak to see how he sees the preparation for ASEAN economic community going in Thailand, and what should be the opportunities for us, lying ahead for us, for ASEAN, and how should we position ourselves regarding ASEAN community.
Well, thank you very much. And nowadays, if you go around, you'll hear the word ASEAN community so often. I think one misunderstanding is that when we talk about the ASEAN community, the abbreviation that we use very often is the AEC. And the AEC is just one pillar of the ASEAN community, the economic pillar. The ASEAN community comprises three pillars: the political, the economic, and the social cultural pillar. Definitely a lot of attention has been placed on the economic pillar because that's the key involving the integration of ASEAN into a single market, into a single production base. That is taking place, at the moment. It's going forward. It's been going on for some time, and I think this will lead to a more competitive ASEAN. We will become a single market of 500 million, and a market of fairly dynamic economies, and I think this should draw more trade investment into the region. Politically, I think ASEAN, for many years now, we are at peace. There is no major conflict among us. We have some tension from time to time, definitely, but we're trying to resolve them by peaceful means. And we're also working as a group to advance peace and security in the region. When we talk about regional architecture, everybody says that ASEAN is the driving force. ASEAN has this special place called the centrality of ASEAN in the regional architecture. So we are recognized as a force for peace and stability in the region. And socially, culturally, I think we're getting to know each other more, and we need to have a people-centered ASEAN where the peoples of ASEAN feels connected to each other, feel a sense of common identity, not just awareness of ASEAN, but common identity of being part of this dynamic community called ASEAN. So I think we're moving forward in these three pillars, and all these three pillars are equally important.
On the economic front, it's fairly easy. ASEAN has always seen itself as bolstering investment, attracting investment from America and Europe, because one country in Southeast Asia would not be as attractive as a region. But the big issue is, how can you promote ASEAN as one community, which is what's being proposed. Until a few years ago, apart from in places like Rangsit University, most Thais didn't know what ASEAN stood for. They had no understanding of what ASEAN was. Isn't there a lot of work to do to bring about ASEAN as one community?
Yes, I agree. When we talk about the ASEAN community, much of that thinking has been concentrated among bureaucrats and perhaps the private sector, and rightly so, because the bureaucrats have been at the forefront. They've been negotiating the various agreements. The private sector, they've been the driving force behind free trade and economic integration. But we have to promote a sense of community among the peoples of ASEAN, and I think the first place to start is education. There has to be a curriculum in the schools, not about each of the ASEAN countries, but what is ASEAN about? The origin, the establishment of ASEAN, the successes of ASEAN, the challenges of ASEAN, and how ASEAN has helped us to survive, to prosper, because at one time during the Cold War, as we all recall, we were faced with common threats and challenges, and we've survived that period because of the unity of ASEAN. And now I think ASEAN is very relevant to our future. So how do we inculcate this sense of being ASEAN among the peoples? And I think that's a challenge that it has to begin from the young people, and it has to start at schools and through education.
I think you're very, very correct here to say that ASEAN itself, at the beginning when it started, it was to prevent war, to create stability among the country in our region, similar to what the EU did. And of course, I think the EU has gone a long way and toward the common market, monetary union, and of course the EU is facing some difficulties, at this time. And perhaps I ask both of you. Of course, ASEAN is moving forward in a way very similar to what the EU has done to create a single market. And then later on, there will be free flow of labor, free flow of capitals, to follow the EU example. Do you envisage that in the future, will there be some problems, in ASEAN? I'm just trying to be provocative, to see whether there will be any adverse consequences to what we are doing in the future. And what about ASEAN itself? How do we keep country in the ASEAN, on amicable term, always? And perhaps you can share views.
Maybe Larry could comment on that.
Well, I think very sensibly analogies are being drawn between the EU and ASEAN. And I think when ASEAN was going through a process of revival and resuscitation in the late 1990s, they looked to the EU as a model. One of the issues that we've seen is that even for an area that is homogenous, like Europeans, there isn't the same kind of diversity as there is in ASEAN. Even there, it's been easy to, with some, but not overly easily, to have one market, to have one monetary system. Of course, it's in crisis now. But we've never moved to actually having one community. We've never moved to having an EU foreign policy. Isn't it going to be even harder for ASEAN with the complexity of the region and the diversity of the region?
Yeah.
Well, I agree that economically, I think maybe following the model of the EU to some extent, we're moving towards integration, and as I said, a single market and production base. But I think we're quite a long way off if you're talking about common monetary policy, and it's because of the different level of economic development among countries in the region. And politically, it's even more difficult. We have to accept the fact because the political systems are not the same in the region. So we have to make leeway or to allow for this diversity, and we have to recognize this diversity. So the approach of ASEAN has always been, let's work together where we have common interests, where we have common grounds. And let's minimize issues where we have differences, issues which could be potential source of tension. And so this is the realistic approach that ASEAN has taken. EU right now, I think, even as they become a political union, they have difficulty trying to forge a common foreign policy, security policy. If you attended meetings with the 27 members of the EU, you can feel the sense of frustration on the EU side when they try to come up with a common policy. So I think ASEAN at this moment, we have this saying, comfort level. So we have to proceed in accordance with the comfort level. But at times, I think we can make a difference. We have made a difference within the region because ASEAN has provided the platform for the major players to come together, to have dialogue, to address common security issues, issues of common concern. So we're moving forward, but because of the diversity within ASEAN, I think we have to be realistic, and we have to bear that in mind.
ASEAN has come a long way, and despite our concerns, on the other matters, we have the EU as our example. So whatever the EU has been doing something wrong or having problem, ASEAN can look at that, and then we can make amends. But ASEAN in the past, if you look back into the history, now we have 10 countries which are at peace. This is really a major achievement. So I think for the next break, we will come up and look at our neighbors closer to us, the GMS. Stay with us.